What is happening in the Boston front offices right now?
So Brad Stevens, he hasn't done his end of year discussion yet. As soon as I saw Jason Tatum, and I know that they said it was a knee, and I can't prove that it wasn't.
Right.
But as soon as I saw Jason Tatum on the bench, putting his thumb into the back of his calf, I was like, because I know that there are occasions when Achilles injuries come from nowhere.
Right.
Fortunately, it hasn't happened to me. But the people that I've talked to who've had Achilles injuries, it rarely doesn't come from anywhere. Obviously we have these terrible instances of Durant and Halliburton where they had injuries, but sometimes they're like, yeah, my Achilles was sore or my calf was sore. And one thing I wonder, and he has never said this, but I wonder, was Jason Tatum's right calf sore last year? Was his Achilles sore? Mm-hmm. And now he's touching that calf. And I was thinking, as soon as I saw him touching the calf, I was like, oh, man.
Look out.
And I don't blame him for one iota of a second. And so now they have to ask themselves in Boston, is this team that we have and this trio, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, if they're all healthy, can they still compete to win championships? I think the answer is yes. But they may go through an evaluation period. The other thing is, in the NBA, 1 out of 3 on a three-point shot is considered good, acceptable, because 1 out of 3 on a 3 is the same as 2 out of 4 on a 2, 6 points. Okay, 3 out of 6 on a 2. 1 out of 4 is the same. 1 out of 3 is 33% on a 2 is the same as 50% on. I'm messing this all up. You understand the math?
I understand.
I clearly don't. I didn't go to Michigan. I went to Kent State.
Oh, good.
Or Northwestern. I saw you. I didn't know you went to Northwestern grad school.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
So basically 2 3-point shots equals 3 2-point shots.
That's right.
There you go.
1 out of 3 is just as good as 2 out of 6. Mm-hmm. Okay. So 3 out of 6. So 1 out of 3 is considered acceptable in NBA shooting. 3-pointers. 2 out of 5, $20 million a year, $25 million a year. You shoot 40% on threes. Boston has been on their 3-point kick for 5 years now. Okay. In the top 3 in 3-point attempts for 5 consecutive years. Even before Joe Mazzulla got there, they were already working. Now, Mazzulla poured gas on it.
Yeah.
But for 5 years now, in 2 of those 5 years, they've reached the finals. 40%. This is, by NBA 3-point standards, would be considered excellent. Praiseworthy. They've shot their threes for 5 years. They've gone to the finals twice. To get to the finals, they're 1-1. Pretty good. LeBron would take 500 in the finals. He would take it right now. So you ask yourself, are you cool with that? You probably got 3 or 4 years left of Tatum and Brown's prime. Hopefully nobody gets injured again. You can't predict that. Are you cool with 2 out of 4, 2 out of 5? Because that's their strategy is essentially the 3-pointer. When it goes in, my God, it's glorious. When it goes out, you're like, why are you shooting it? They're 2 out of 5. So do they want to stick with that? Are they? I know what Joe Mazzulla feels. Mazzulla is borderline defiant. And so the question is, are you going to stick with it? You continue to shoot the threes.
And so that's the conversation they're going to have.
Right.
But what about a certain center in Milwaukee with a sense of wanderlust potentially? Right? I mean, at the end of the day, the threes didn't go in and Embiid was unguardable because they didn't have somebody to guard him.
Right. And
thus, we're now talking about the Celtics game planning for future seasons.
Okay, so the thing about whenever people talk about Giannis, like, for example, Masai Ujiri was just hired as the president of the Mavericks yesterday, and people were like, Masai tried to get Giannis in Toronto. They have connections. They have African roots that are important to them. People have said, well, Masai tried to trade for Giannis. That doesn't make sense to me. The Bucks are the future of the Mavericks is a 19-year-old. You're not trading for a 31-year-old. And I see other teams like this too that are like Houston, for example. Well, I know Durant's older, but their whole core is younger. It doesn't make sense to put a guy in his 30s. Boston's a different story. The window with Tatum and Brown is comparable, I think, to the window with Giannis. I think, you never know, but you could sell yourself on that. So you're going to ask yourself, and even if it's not Giannis, the question is, do you break up Brown and Tatum? for a different pairing. Because if you're still going to shoot the three, you're not trading for Giannis. The guy doesn't shoot threes. If you believe in your 40%, you're going to accept your 40%. You're going to shoot the three next year. You're not trading for Giannis. Mm-hmm. You're more likely to trade for Embiid, which you wouldn't do. I'm just saying, like, Embiid shoots threes. Mm-hmm. So are they continuing to shoot the three? If the answer is yes, I think Derek White, Tatum, and Brown are staying together. If the answer is anything but yes, if it's maybe or we'll see or let's think about it, that's because the thing about it is you have to understand when it comes to the Bucks, they don't control their draft for like the next 4 years. When I say they don't control, they've either traded the pick or they've traded the swap. So a Giannis trade can't bring back a rebuild. And not only that, but they're about to flatten the lottery odds so that if you get in the relegation zone, you may not get a top pick. In fact, you may end up with the 10th pick if you have the worst record under the new proposal. So if you're going to make a deal to Milwaukee, like that's what happened, like Golden.
Dub Nation, let me ask you the question that can define the entire Warriors offseason. What if Golden State's last great swing of the Steph Curry era is not a small move, not a role player patch, not another hopeful adjustment, but Giannis Antetokounmpo? Because the truth is, this is no longer just fan fantasy. The Warriors already showed how serious they were. The transcript you brought in says Golden State essentially told Milwaukee, "We'll give you 4 first-round picks." That is not flirting. That is not checking in. That is a franchise announcing that it understands the urgency of the moment. ESPN reported the same basic framework back at the deadline. The Warriors had a path to offer up to 4 firsts, and Milwaukee still didn't bite. Now here's the big question. What would actually have to happen for Giannis to become a Warrior? First, Milwaukee would have to decide this summer that the relationship has reached the point where it's better to move him than drag the uncertainty into next season. That's not impossible. ESPN reported 5 days ago that Bucks co-owner Jimmy Haslam wants Giannis's future settled before the NBA draft, which tells you the franchise itself understands this cannot stay blurry forever. Second, Giannis would have to be at least open-minded about Golden State as a destination, not necessarily campaigning for it publicly, but willing enough that the Warriors could feel confident making the biggest offer of their lives. Third, Golden State would need to build a package Milwaukee can actually live with, and that's the hardest part, because the transcript makes one thing clear. Milwaukee's problem with a Warriors package is not just the number of picks, it's the timeline. If the Bucks don't control their own draft for years, then a rebuild package built mostly around distant first-rounders doesn't solve tomorrow, it solves later. Milwaukee needs something that lets them stay relevant now. That means if Golden State really wants Giannis, it probably cannot be just Draymond and 4 picks, or here's a bunch of future paper. It would need meaningful players, a younger centerpiece, and possibly the Warriors' number 11 pick from this year's draft as part of the structure. The San Francisco Chronicle reported today that Golden State did not get lottery luck and will indeed pick 11th, which matters because that pick is now a real trade chip in a deep class. And now the fun part, the basketball. Because if the Warriors actually pull this off, are they contenders? Yes, absolutely yes. If Giannis joins a healthy Steph and a healthy Jimmy Butler, Golden State immediately becomes one of the most dangerous teams in the league. Steph gives you the most extreme gravity in basketball. Giannis gives you the most violent rim pressure in basketball. Jimmy gives you late-game control, defense, toughness, and another playoff shot creator. That is not just a good trio, that is a title core trio. The half-court offense becomes harder to trap because teams can't send 2 or 3 at Steph if Giannis has a runway. Jimmy becomes even more dangerous because he can attack a bent defense instead of having to create every ugly bucket from scratch. And defensively, Giannis, Jimmy, and Draymond, if Draymond stays in some version of the roster, would be chaos for opponents. If Draymond has to be part of the outgoing package, then Golden State loses brain power and defensive communication, yes, but even then, Giannis plus Jimmy gives you length, switching, recovery, and playoff-level physicality. There is one honest caution, though. Jimmy Butler's recovery is not something anyone can casually assume. ESPN reported when he had ACL surgery in February that the Warriors would not update his progress until early next season, and the language strongly suggested uncertainty about whether he'll be ready from the jump. So when we talk about Steph, Giannis, and Jimmy together, we are talking about the version where Jimmy is back and functioning at a high level, not a guarantee for opening night. But the favorable conclusion for Warriors fans is still powerful. If there is any franchise that should be thinking this aggressively, it's Golden State. Steph is still elite. The clock is ticking. Giannis is one of the only players alive who can change the entire geometry of the team overnight. So now I'm asking you, Dub Nation, if the Warriors have to empty the clip, picks, young players, maybe even painful names, do you do it for Giannis? Because if he lands in the Bay with Steph and a healthy Jimmy, this team is not just relevant again, it is back in the championship conversation immediately. Drop your take in the comments, hit like, and subscribe, because this is the kind of summer rumor that can turn into a franchise-defining move very fast.